Hi everyone, it's Pete here. Welcome to part 3 of my build guide to the Tamiya Volvo A60H Hauler 6x6 kit. So in part 2 I got up to step 25, which meant I had all the dampers on. Step 26 is setting up the radio gear so we can centralise the steering servo. So I've got the radio gear set up here and I'm just checking the trim is central and also the steering rate is on full. So the servo seems to be working fine, so I'm just going to switch off the transmitter with the steering wheel in the centre. While I had this set up I also centralised the other servo that I'm going to be using for the rear steering. Still on step 26 we need to attach the steering arm to the servo, which is made of parts B11 or B12 depending on your servo, then B6 and E4 and then the non-slip washer. Just need to get it onto the servo as near as possible to the angle that's shown in the picture. You also need to select the screw that's suitable for your servo, so if it's a plastic gear servo it tends to be a self-tapping screw, or this one which is a metal gear servo so it has the machine screw. Just need to check that the servo saver springs back to the centre okay. If it doesn't then just undo the screw a little bit. Step 27 we're making this steering linkage part, which just means putting some ball connectors and 850 bearings into this E7 part. If you haven't got the additional ball bearings then there's the BB3 metal bearing supplied with the kit. Then just put in the ball connectors where it shows. Next we're attaching these C11 parts to the servo using 10mm screws and washers. Step 28 we need to make 3 identical tie rods by putting the MC13 rod ends onto the MC14 bar. Just need to match it up to the diagram to get the right length. So just make 3 the same and attach them to the ball connectors on the E7 part. Step 29 we're attaching the steering linkage to the chassis using the MC15 shaft and the MC3 screw. So you need to feed it through this way up and you end up with one arm sticking out on the motor side and 2 arms sticking out on the other side. You need to centralise it with the hole in the chassis so the MC15 shaft goes through the hole in the bearings. You need to poke it down as far as it will go. So next you need to put in the MC3 screw that stops the MC15 from falling out. Then you just need to attach the steering arms to the ball connectors on the uprights. So just checking the steering all moves freely. Step 30 we're attaching the front steering servo using a couple of 10mm self tappers. I'm just adding a washer to the screw that goes in the slot. The slot lets you move that screw for different sizes of servo. The only tricky thing here is you've got to feed the screwdriver through a hole that they've put on the other side of the chassis. The other part of this step is just to put some ball connectors into the side of the chassis here. I do actually change this later, which I'll come on to. The red servo didn't really go with the colour scheme of this, so I'll just put some black electrical tape around it. Just need to attach this steering tie rod to the ball connector. So at this point I'm going to go back into the optional rear steer part of the manual. So this is step 5 where we're sorting out the servo horn and steering linkage. So it's B11 or B12 depending on your servo, then it's B6 and then it's part E4 and then it's the non-slip washer. I was using a little plastic washer here for some reason, I can't remember why. I tend to put a bit of thread lock on the servo screw, don't do this if you've got a plastic gear servo. The servo horn's as near as I can get it to the picture in the manual. Just checking the servo saver springs back to the centre the same way I did on the front. And there's one ball connector to go in this. So then we've got this steering linkage part E8. I'm using 850 size ball bearings rather than the BB3 850 parts that come with the kit. Then there's 3 ball connectors that go in where it shows. So then there's the E9 and C11 parts to attach to the servo and you just need to make sure they're the right way up. And they go on with a 10mm self-tapping screw and a washer. Step 6 we're making the rear steering tie rods. For the short OP2 part you need to get a hex driver to screw it into the adjuster. So So these are the shorter OP3 adjusters, so you just need to screw them together until the length is the same as in the picture. So then there's two of the longer rods using the MC14 threaded shaft and the MC13 adjuster. So they just clip onto the ball connectors on the steering linkage where it shows. So step 7 is pretty much the same as step 29 on the front steering. Just need to make sure this goes in the way that they say. The MC15 shaft goes through the bearings in the linkage, and then the MC3 screw holds it in. Then it's just a matter of attaching the adjusters to the ball connectors on the uprights. Step 8 is attaching the rear steer servo, and that's attached with a couple of 10mm self-tapping screws that drop through the chassis from the other side. Then the short tie rod attaches to the ball connector on the servo horn. So it's all looking good, and then we're back to step 31 in the main part of the manual, which is putting on the rear bumper. So instead of using the standard C19 bumper, I'm actually going to use the wheelie bar parts, which are included in the kit. And all you need is a bar which is 21mm long and 5mm in diameter. All I did was cut the end off a 5mm machine screw. It's fair to say this doesn't do wheelies even with a brushless set because of the wheelbase. I just think it looks more Tamiya to have a wheelie bar on this. And this just goes on with the same screws as the standard bump, which are the 10mm self tappers. Step 32 is building up the truck bed, and the first thing to do is to put on some of the stickers. Next you need to cut 100mm length of the sponge tape and stick it on the bottom of the bed. Then there are these H8 and H9 parts, which are the pivots for the bed, and they go on with the self-tapping screws. I didn't video doing the H9 part, but it's the same as H8 apart from it's the mirror image. Then there are these H2 parts which go on the side using the shorter 8mm self-tapping screws. Then there's a ball connector to go into each of the H2 parts. Step 33 I've already done as part of the rear steering. It's just to put that MC15 bar in and lock it in with the MC3 screw. Part 2 of step 33 is just to put two 20mm pieces of sponge tape into the battery tray, and then you attach the bed support, which just sort of hooks into place. Step 34, we're attaching the bed to the chassis. So you need to use a bit of force to get these pivots over this part of the back of the chassis. You need these H1 parts to hold it in place, and they're screwed on with 10mm machine screws. So you can tip the bed up to get the battery in and out, and you just need to hold the front down with a couple of body clips. And that seems like a good place to leave this episode of the build guide. In the next part, I'm going to be finishing the kit and taking it for a little test drive. What could possibly go wrong there? Bollocks. Oh yeah, that. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.